Introduction. When we talk about success, most people immediately picture talent. The kid who always knew the answers in school. The athlete who moved with impossible grace. The musician who could pick up any instrument and play it like they were born for it. It's comforting, in a way, to believe that talent explains everything. If someone else achieves greatness, well, it must be because they were blessed with something we weren't. That explanation lets us off the hook. But life keeps proving that story wrong. I remember a boy from my neighborhood. He wasn't the smartest in class. He didn't win the spelling bees. He wasn't the fastest on the field. But here's the thing. He never quit. He studied longer than anyone else, ran drills after practice ended, asked questions no one else cared to ask. People overlooked him for years, and yet he kept showing up. By the time we graduated, guess who was standing out? Not the so-called prodigies. Him. The one with grit. That's the word Angela Duckworth gives us. Grit. When she first began teaching, she saw the same pattern. Students who looked average somehow outperformed the gifted. At first, it puzzled her. But the more she observed, the more she realized. The deciding factor wasn't IQ, it wasn't charm, it wasn't luck. It was grit. Passion combined with perseverance, stretched across time. Now, grit isn't glamorous. It's not the kind of thing you can show off in a single moment. Talent dazzles immediately. Grit takes years to reveal itself. But when it does, the results are undeniable. And here's why this book matters. It gives us hope. If success were about talent alone, most of us would be stuck with whatever hand we were dealt at birth. But grit? That's different. Grit can be cultivated. Grit is within reach. As I walk you through these chapters, I want you to imagine I'm telling you a story, not lecturing, not throwing academic jargon, but sitting across from you at a cafe or walking beside you late at night, sharing what this book taught me and how it echoes in real life. Because the truth is, grit isn't an abstract theory. It's alive in our choices, our struggles, and our victories. So let's begin. Take a breath, lean in, and let's explore what grit really is. Welcome to MindSpark, where great books meet powerful ideas. Chapter 1. What Grit Is. Picture Angela Duckworth in her first classroom. She's standing at the chalkboard, looking at rows of teenagers. Some are quick. They catch on immediately, toss out answers, breeze through the material. Others lag behind, struggling, stumbling. If the world were fair and predictable, the quick ones should end up on top. But that's not what she saw. The ones who excelled weren't always the brightest. They were the ones who refused to give up. One student in particular stuck in her mind. He wasn't flashy. He didn't test well. But every time he failed, he tried again. He stayed after class. He asked for extra problems. He practiced longer than anyone else. Slowly, steadily, he climbed. And by the end of the year, he had surpassed classmates who had started with more obvious ability. This baffled her. Shouldn't intelligence predict achievement? Wasn't that what all the tests and rankings suggested? Yet here, in real time, she was watching effort outpace talent. That's when the seed of the idea took root. Maybe what truly matters isn't how smart you are, but how determined you are. Now let's pause here. Think about your own life. Have you ever watched someone you considered ordinary suddenly achieve something extraordinary? Maybe it was a coworker who kept grinding quietly, then landed the promotion no one expected. Or a friend who failed at diets a dozen times but finally lost the weight because they just didn't quit. That's grit in action. Angela defines grit as a blend of two elements, passion and perseverance. Passion doesn't just mean excitement. Excitement is easy. Anyone can get fired up about a new project, a new hobby, a new relationship. But passion, in the context of grit, is commitment stretched over years. It's waking up day after day still caring, even when the shine has worn off. Perseverance is the other half. It's staying the course when obstacles appear. It's falling and rising again. It's being stubborn in the best possible way. Put them together and you get grit. Not glamorous, not instant, but transformative. I once heard grit described as the difference between a firework and a candle. Fireworks explode with light, loud and dazzling, but they vanish in seconds. A candle burns steadily, quietly, often unnoticed, yet it lights the darkness far longer. Talent is a firework. Grit is a candle. And in the long run, the candle wins. Angela even developed a tool called the grit scale, a way to measure someone's level of perseverance and passion. She tested it across schools, sports teams, military training camps. Time after time, grit predicted who would stick it out and succeed. At West Point, cadets with sky-high test scores often dropped out during the brutal first summer. But those with grit, the ones who endured hardship and held their goals tightly, made it through. In the National Spelling Bee, kids with higher grit scores advanced further, regardless of natural verbal talent. Why? Because they studied longer, pushed harder, persisted past boredom. These findings echo a simple truth we've all seen but rarely name. Enthusiasm is common. Endurance is rare. I remember a friend who once started learning guitar. At first, he was on fire. He bought the nicest instrument he could afford, watched tutorials for hours, learned a few chords. For weeks, he played every evening, posting videos online. Then, silence. The guitar gathered dust. A month later, he had moved on to photography, then cooking, then something else. He mistook excitement for passion. Without perseverance, the fire fizzled. Compare that to another friend who picked up running. She wasn't fast. In fact, she hated running at first. But she committed to a small goal, a few kilometers, 3 times a week. Rain or shine, she kept going. Months passed, then years. Now she's completed multiple marathons. She's not a prodigy. She's not gifted, but she's gritty. Which one impresses you more? The spark that flares and dies, or the steady flame that endures? Angela's conclusion in this first chapter is both simple and profound. Success isn't about being the smartest or the most talented. It's about being the most consistent. Talent matters, sure. But without grit, talent is wasted. With grit, even modest talent can grow into greatness. And this is where the story really begins. Because once you accept that grit is the secret ingredient, the natural next questions follow. How exactly does grit beat talent? What fuels it? How do we develop it in ourselves, in our children, in our teams? Those are the questions the rest of the book answers. Pause here, take a breath, reflect. We've only set the stage, defined grit, seen its power, and glimpsed why it matters. In the chapters ahead, we'll go deeper, into talent and effort, passion over time, deliberate practice, purpose, hope, and the ways grit can actually be grown. But for now, let this idea settle. Enthusiasm is common. Endurance is rare. And grit, that quiet endurance, is what truly separates those who finish from those who fade. Chapter 2. Talent versus effort. When we look at someone extraordinary, maybe a world-class athlete, or a brilliant scientist, or a famous musician, the instinctive reaction is, wow, what a talent. It feels natural to explain greatness through talent. After all, talent is visible. It jumps out at you. But Angela Duckworth flips this idea upside down. She argues that talent is not destiny. In fact, talent by itself is far less important than most people think. She lays it out with a formula, not a dry academic formula, but one that actually explains how achievement works. Talent x effort = skill. Skill x effort = achievement. Look at that carefully. Effort is in the equation twice. Let me slow this down with a story. Back in high school, there were 2 kids in my math class. One was a natural. He seemed to breathe numbers. Teachers adored him. He finished problems before anyone else even understood the question. Everyone, including me, thought he was destined for greatness. The other kid struggled. He had to ask for help constantly. His first test scores weren't good. But here's the thing, he didn't stop. He studied late. He worked problems over and over. He went to the teacher after class. He practiced relentlessly. Fast forward 2 years. Who do you think ended up getting into the best universities, pursuing higher-level mathematics, and winning competitions? Not the natural. He had coasted on talent, but when the problems got harder, his effort didn't keep up. The grinder, the one who wouldn't quit, pulled ahead. That story is Angela's formula come alive. Talent gave the first boy a head start, but effort was what turned skill into mastery. And with double weight in the equation, effort simply won out. I think about this in sports, too. You ever see a naturally gifted athlete who dazzles at first, but never makes it big? Meanwhile, another athlete with average beginnings climbs slowly but steadily until one day they're at the top. That's talent versus effort. Jerry Rice, one of the greatest football players in history, wasn't the fastest. He wasn't the strongest. Scouts overlooked him, but his training ethic was brutal. He pushed his body past limits day after day, practicing harder and smarter than anyone else. In the end, effort multiplied his talent into an unmatched career. And that brings us back to something Angela insists on. Talent counts, but effort counts twice. This chapter forced me to rethink the way I compliment people. How often do we tell kids, "You're so smart"? That makes them feel talent is everything. And when they struggle later, they think, maybe I'm not smart after all, and they quit. But if we praise effort, you worked so hard on this and it paid off, then we teach them that progress comes from grit, not gifts. Angela shows that our culture has a talent bias. We love the myth of the prodigy. But when you look closely, greatness usually hides years of invisible effort. So here's the truth this chapter leaves us with. Talent opens the door. Effort walks you through it. Effort keeps you moving. And effort is what brings you to the other side. Chapter 3. Passion over time. Now, let's shift to passion. When people talk about grit, they often imagine perseverance, grinding through obstacles. That's true. But grit has another half. Passion. And not the fleeting, fiery kind. Angela warns us, passion is not intensity, it's consistency. Let me paint a picture. We all know someone who jumps from obsession to obsession. One month they're learning the guitar. The next, they're obsessed with photography. Then, coding. Then, cooking. Each time they burn hot. Each time they fade fast. That's not passion, that's infatuation. Real passion, the kind that fuels grit, is steadier. It's not about being wildly excited every day. It's about commitment stretched over years. It's about waking up again and again, still caring, still showing up, even on the boring days. I'll confess something here. I've been guilty of shiny object syndrome. I've started projects with fireworks in my chest, convinced this was it. This was the thing I'd dedicate myself to forever. 2 weeks later, I was distracted by something else. Looking back, I wasn't really passionate. I was chasing novelty. When Angela describes gritty people, she makes this clear. They don't reinvent themselves every 6 months. They stay with a direction. Sure, they may evolve within it, but they don't abandon it. They dig deeper and deeper, and over time their commitment compounds into mastery. Think about world-class scientists. Do they chase 100 random questions? No. They devote decades to a single line of inquiry. The progress may be slow, sometimes invisible, but their steady devotion eventually cracks open new discoveries. Or think of an Olympic athlete. They don't switch sports every year. They dedicate themselves to one discipline, training day after day, year after year, often through boredom and pain. That's passion over time. Angela says, passion is the compass. Perseverance is the fuel. Without passion, perseverance becomes empty grind. Without perseverance, passion burns out. But together, they make grit. And here's a subtle but important point. Passion deepens through perseverance. The more you stick with something, the more it becomes part of who you are. That identity, I am a runner, I am a writer, I am a teacher, strengthens the passion. And the strengthened passion keeps you persevering. It's a loop. This made me stop and ask myself, what am I truly passionate about, long term? Not just what excites me this week. Not just what looks cool right now. What am I willing to stick with for years? Even when it gets boring, even when it gets hard. The answer wasn't obvious. And maybe that's the point. Passion, in the grit sense, isn't about finding the perfect magical calling. It's about choosing a direction and then committing to it long enough for the passion to grow roots. Angela describes passion like a marriage, not a crush. Crushes are intoxicating. Marriages are steady, tested, sometimes mundane, but they last. And when it comes to achieving something meaningful, grit demands marriage-level passion. So to sum up these 2 chapters, talent gets too much credit, effort counts twice. Passion isn't about intensity, it's about consistency, stretched over years. Together, They reveal a truth that runs against the grain of our instant gratification culture. Greatness is built not on sparks, but on embers that burn steadily, fueled by deliberate effort and unwavering passion. Pause, reflect. We've now crossed the halfway mark of the foundation. Chapter 1. Defined grit. Chapter 2 showed us effort outweighing talent. Chapter 3 revealed passion not as a spark, but as a steady flame. In the next part, we'll go deeper into the mechanics. Chapter 4, Deliberate Practice, and Chapter 5, Purpose. How to train grit, and how to tie it to something larger than yourself. By the way, if you're enjoying this summary, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Chapter 4, Deliberate Practice. Think back to the last time you said to yourself, I need to practice more. Maybe it was playing an instrument. Maybe it was writing. Maybe it was a sport, or even public speaking. Now, be honest. What did that practice look like? Did you spend time repeating the things you were already good at? Did you play the songs you loved, the ones that made you feel competent? Did you go over the easy drills, the comfortable exercises, the familiar steps? If you did, and most of us do, then I have some bad news. That wasn't really practice. Not the kind that matters. Not the kind that changes you. Angela Duckworth calls this deliberate practice, and it's very different from what most of us think practice is. Let me tell you a story. When I was younger, I had a friend who wanted to get better at basketball. Every evening, he'd shoot hoops for an hour or two. But here's the thing. He always shot from the same spot, the free throw line, over and over again. Sure, he got better at free throws, but the moment he had to move, dribble, shoot under pressure, he fell apart. Another friend took a different route. He didn't just practice what he liked. He asked his coach, "Where do I mess up most often?" The coach told him, "Your left-hand dribble is weak. Defenders see it every time." So that's what he worked on. He fumbled. He lost the ball. He cursed. He hated it. But he kept going. Day after day, he hammered at his weakness. Guess who grew faster? Not the free throw guy. It was the one who practiced deliberately, right where it hurt. That's the essence of deliberate practice. Working on your weaknesses with purpose, focus, and repetition until they become strengths. Angela didn't just stumble upon this idea. She studied experts across fields, from elite musicians to spelling bee champions. What separated the best from the rest wasn't just hours logged, but how those hours were spent. Top musicians didn't just play for fun. They spent time on the hardest passages, the notes that made them stumble, the transitions that broke down. They isolated the problem, slowed it down, repeated it until it was smooth, then reintegrated it into the whole. Spelling bee champions didn't just read lists. They zeroed in on the words they kept missing. They studied roots, origins, the trickiest patterns. They didn't shy away from mistakes. They chased them. This blew my mind, because it explains why some people can spend 10 years practicing something and stay mediocre, while others skyrocket. The difference isn't time, it's deliberate practice. And let me be honest, deliberate practice sucks. It's not glamorous. It's not fun. It doesn't give you the quick dopamine hit of playing to your strengths. It's frustrating. It's tedious. It's humbling. But that's exactly why it works. Because growth doesn't happen where you're comfortable. Growth happens at the edge of your ability, where failure is constant, where mistakes feel endless, where you want to quit. If regular practice is a stroll in the park, deliberate practice is a workout on a steep hill with weights on your back. Painful, exhausting, but transformative. There's a famous story about Jerry Rice, the legendary wide receiver in American football. By many accounts, he wasn't the fastest. He wasn't the tallest. Scouts underestimated him, but his practice habits were brutal. He would run routes uphill, repeat drills long after teammates left, and condition himself in ways others thought excessive. He attacked every weakness, and over time, his deliberate practice turned him into one of the greatest players in history. The lesson is simple. Deliberate practice, not natural ability, created Jerry Rice. Angela points out another key element: feedback. Deliberate practice isn't something you do in a vacuum. It requires constant, immediate feedback. Otherwise, how would you know what's wrong or whether you're improving? Think of a violinist with a teacher correcting finger placement, or a chess player analyzing mistakes with a coach. Or a writer getting harsh edits from an editor. Feedback stings. It bruises the ego. But without it, practice becomes aimless. This made me think about my own habits. When was the last time I actively sought feedback instead of avoiding it? Too often, I hide behind comfort. I'd rather hear praise than criticism. But that doesn't build grit. Grit grows when you invite correction, absorb it, and use it to fuel better practice. Here's another thing about deliberate practice. It's not endless. Experts don't grind for 12 hours straight. They practice in intense, focused bursts, 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours, then rest. Because deliberate practice is mentally exhausting. It's like weightlifting for the brain. Do too much at once and the quality drops. That's why Angela says deliberate practice is a lifestyle, not a binge. It's not about working harder for a week, then collapsing. It's about weaving purposeful, focused effort into your routine, consistently, over years. When I reflect on this, I realize why so many of us give up on dreams. We expect practice to feel good. We expect it to be rewarding in the moment. But deliberate practice often feels the opposite. It feels like failure. It feels like slogging through mud. The secret is reframing that discomfort. Instead of seeing it as proof that we're not good enough, we can see it as proof that we're getting better. Each stumble is a signal. Here's where the growth is. That shift, from avoiding discomfort to seeking it, is what separates gritty people from the rest. Let's pause here. Think about something you've always wanted to master. Maybe it's drawing. Maybe it's public speaking. Maybe it's fitness. Now ask yourself, have you been practicing deliberately? Or have you been circling the safe zone, repeating what already feels good? If you want grit to grow, deliberate practice is the path. It's hard. It's painful. But it's the forge where skill is built. Angela closes this chapter by reminding us, grit isn't just about pushing longer. It's about pushing smarter. It's not about endless hours, but about focused effort. So if you want to see what you're really capable of, don't just count the hours. Make the hours count. Pause, reflect. By now, we've added another piece to the grit puzzle. Grit isn't just passion and perseverance. It's expressed day after day through deliberate practice. The kind that hurts, the kind that pushes you beyond comfort, the kind that actually makes you grow. And with this, we're ready for the next layer. Purpose. Because even deliberate practice won't last without a deeper reason to keep going. Chapter 5. Purpose. Let's talk about why we do what we do. Because here's the truth. Passion and perseverance can carry you a long way, but without purpose, even the strongest grit eventually runs dry. Purpose is the deeper why that fuels your effort. It's the reason you keep going when logic says you should quit, when exhaustion whispers, just stop. Angela Duckworth noticed something fascinating. Among the gritty people she studied, soldiers, teachers, athletes, entrepreneurs, many of them had one thing in common. They weren't just working for themselves. They had tethered their effort to something bigger. Think about it. Why does a teacher, underpaid and overworked, still stay in the classroom? Why does a nurse, exhausted after double shifts, keep showing up for patients? Why does an activist, ridiculed or ignored, still fight for change? Because their effort connects to a purpose beyond themselves. When Angela asked teachers why they hadn't left for easier, better-paying jobs, the answers weren't about money or recognition. They said things like, because I know I'm making a difference for kids, or because someone believed in me when I was young, and now I want to be that person for someone else. That's purpose. I'll never forget a story from a friend of mine who's a doctor. During her residency, she went days with barely any sleep. The work was grueling, the stress relentless. I asked her once, "How do you keep going?" She smiled and said, "Because when I walk into a patient's room and see their relief, their hope, that's worth everything." That's purpose speaking. Without it, the grind would crush her. With it, she could endure what seemed impossible. Angela makes a sharp distinction here. Purpose isn't about grandiosity. It doesn't mean you have to save the world, end hunger, or cure disease. Purpose can be intimate, local, personal. It's not about scale. It's about meaning. A parent who works hard to provide for their children has purpose. An artist who creates because their work brings joy or provokes thought has purpose. A small business owner who treats customers with care, making their lives just a bit better, that's purpose too. The size of the mission doesn't matter. What matters is that it's bigger than you. Now let's pause. Ask yourself, what's the why behind what you're doing? Strip away the surface answers. Money, recognition, comfort. Those things fade fast. What's beneath that? When I asked myself that question, it shook me. Because some of the things I thought mattered turned out to be shallow. I wanted approval. I wanted status. But those motives didn't sustain me. The projects driven by ego died quickly. The ones driven by meaning, by connection, by service, by something that mattered beyond me, those are the ones that lasted. Angela's research confirms this over and over. People with purpose don't just endure longer, they thrive. Purpose transforms grit from stubbornness into something noble. She also shows that purpose often evolves. It doesn't always start noble. Many people begin pursuing something out of curiosity or even selfish motives. But over time, as they see the ripple effects of their work, their motivation deepens. A young lawyer might start out chasing prestige. Years later, they may realize the deeper satisfaction comes from advocating for justice. A musician might start out wanting fame. Over time, they may discover the joy of touching lives through their songs. Purpose grows as we connect what we do with how it matters to others. And here's the beautiful part. You don't have to wait for a lightning bolt of meaning. You can cultivate purpose, deliberately. Angela suggests 3 ways people often find or build purpose. Reflection. Asking yourself, how does my work make a difference? Connection. Talking to others whose lives are touched by what you do. Reframing. Shifting perspective. Seeing your tasks not as chores, but as contributions. Let me share an example. There was a janitor working at NASA during the space race. When asked what his job was, he didn't say, I clean floors. He said, I'm helping put a man on the moon. Same tasks, same broom, different frame. One perspective drains, the other sustains. That's the power of purpose. This chapter made me think about the times I've wanted to quit. Every single time, the difference maker was purpose. When I was grinding for my own ego, fatigue crushed me. But when I felt I was serving someone else, even in a small way, energy seemed to appear from nowhere. Angela says gritty people aren't just stubborn. They're anchored. Purpose ties them down when storms hit. Passion and perseverance are the engine and the wheels. Purpose is the map. It keeps you pointed in the right direction. Here's the paradox. Purpose doesn't make the hard work less hard, but it makes the hard work worth it. Think of marathon runners raising money for charity. Do their legs hurt less at mile 20? No. But the pain becomes meaningful, and meaning makes pain bearable. So where does that leave us? If you want grit, find your purpose. Or, if you don't know it yet, keep asking, keep experimenting, keep reframing. And remember, purpose doesn't have to be earth-shattering. It just has to reach beyond you. Because when you connect your effort to something greater, grit transforms from raw endurance into something deeper, devotion. Pause, reflect. We've now uncovered another piece of the grit puzzle. Passion keeps you caring. Perseverance keeps you going. Purpose makes it meaningful. Together, they create a force that can outlast almost anything. Chapter 6. Hope. Hope. It's a small word, but in Angela Duckworth's world, it carries massive weight. Because grit isn't just about grinding harder, or loving something deeply, or serving a bigger purpose. It's also about believing, truly believing, that tomorrow can be better than today. Without that belief, effort dies. Without that belief, even passion and purpose fade. Hope, in the context of grit, isn't wishful thinking. It's not sitting back, crossing your fingers, and waiting for life to hand you miracles. It's active. It's stubborn. It's the conviction that I can keep going, and things will improve if I do. Angela makes a crucial point here. Hope is what powers perseverance through failure. Think about it. When you fall down, what makes you get back up? Not talent, not even passion. It's hope. The quiet inner voice that says, this isn't the end. I can try again, I can do better next time. I'm reminded of Thomas Edison. When he was asked how he felt about failing thousands of times before inventing the light bulb, his answer was legendary. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. That's hope talking. Not blind optimism, but a resilient belief that failure is part of the process. Now imagine if Edison had seen each failed attempt as final. Imagine if he'd said, well, Guess I'm not cut out for this. The world would still be dark. Hope kept him in the game. Angela's research shows that people with grit don't just endure hardship. They interpret hardship differently. Where others see proof that they're not good enough, gritty people see feedback. Where others see failure, they see progress in disguise. And the difference is hope. Let me tell you a personal story. A few years ago, I applied for a job I really wanted. I poured hours into the application, rehearsed for the interviews, gave it everything, and I failed. Rejected. Not even close. For weeks, I spiraled. I told myself I wasn't good enough, that I'd never get a role like that. I almost quit applying altogether. But then, slowly, I reframed it. I thought, okay, maybe this rejection wasn't a verdict. Maybe it was a lesson. What can I learn here? I looked back at my application. It wasn't strong. My interview answers lacked clarity. It hurt to admit it, but once I did, I improved. The next opportunity, I did better. And eventually, I landed a job that was an even better fit. That shift, from despair to determination, was hope in action. Angela calls this kind of hope gritty optimism. It's not naive. It doesn't deny reality. It doesn't pretend pain isn't painful. Instead, it looks reality in the face and says, this isn't permanent, this isn't defining, and I can keep moving. Psychologists call this an explanatory style, the way we explain setbacks to ourselves. People with a pessimistic style see failure as permanent. This will never change. Pervasive. This ruins everything. And personal. It's all my fault, I'm broken. People with a hopeful style see failure as temporary. This is just for now. Specific. It only affects this one thing. And external. I can change my approach. Guess which group builds grit? The hopeful ones. Angela gives examples from West Point. Cadets face brutal physical and mental challenges. Many quit. But the ones who stay aren't necessarily the strongest. They're the ones who, when they fail, don't think, I'm weak. They think, I need to train harder. Same event, different interpretation. That's hope at work. I think about kids in school, too. When a child struggles with math, the difference between quitting and persisting often comes down to what they believe. If they think, I'm stupid, I'll never get it, they give up. If they think, I don't understand it yet, but I can learn, they keep going. That little word, yet, is hope in disguise. Angela links this to Carol Dweck's famous idea of the growth mindset, the belief that abilities aren't fixed, but can be developed. When you have a growth mindset, failure doesn't define you. It instructs you. It tells you where to grow. When you have a fixed mindset, failure feels like a death sentence. You think, I failed, therefore I am a failure. Grit grows where the growth mindset lives. And the growth mindset, at its heart, is just hope wearing academic clothes. One of my favorite parts of this chapter is how Angela describes hope not as a feeling, but as a habit. It's something you cultivate. Every time you reframe a setback, you strengthen hope. Every time you choose to see struggle as progress, you train your brain to persist. Hope isn't just inborn optimism, it's a practice. And let's be real, practicing hope isn't easy. The world gives us plenty of reasons to give up. Rejections pile up, failures sting, setbacks discourage. But here's the thing. The gritty don't deny the pain. They don't fake happiness. They acknowledge the pain, then remind themselves, this is not forever. This is not fatal. I can still move forward. That's the essence of grit's hope. Let me pause here and ask you, think about the last time you failed. How did you explain it to yourself? Did you see it as permanent, pervasive, personal? Or did you remind yourself it was temporary, specific, and improvable? That choice of interpretation may have made the difference between giving up and trying again. Angela closes this chapter with a powerful truth. Grit isn't blind perseverance. It's hopeful perseverance. Without hope, perseverance collapses into exhaustion. With hope, perseverance transforms into resilience. Hope is what whispers, try again. Hope is what says, not yet, but soon. And hope is what allows grit to last, even through storms. Pause, reflect. Now we've added yet another piece to the grit puzzle. Passion keeps the fire alive. Perseverance keeps us moving. Purpose makes it meaningful. And hope makes it possible. Together, these elements form the architecture of grit. Chapter 7. Growing Grit. So far, We've defined grit. We've seen how it beats talent, how passion sustains it, how deliberate practice strengthens it, how purpose fuels it, and how hope keeps it alive. But here's the million-dollar question. If grit matters so much, can we actually grow it? Or is it fixed, something you either have or don't? Angela's answer is hopeful. Grit is not a gift bestowed at birth. It's a muscle. And like any muscle, it can be trained, stretched, and strengthened. Growing grit from the inside out. The first way grit grows is internal. Through the choices we make, the mindsets we adopt, the habits we practice daily. Angela identifies a few key ingredients: interest, practice, purpose, and hope. Interest. It starts with interest. You can't sustain passion for years if you don't care about the thing you're pursuing. That doesn't mean you're born knowing your one true calling. In fact, most people stumble into their passions. Angela interviewed people who were world-class in their fields: artists, scientists, entrepreneurs. Almost none of them said, "I knew from day one this was my destiny." Instead, they experimented. They tried different things. They followed sparks of curiosity until one caught fire. I think about my own life. There were moments I thought, this is it, only to realize a few months later that it wasn't. But each experiment taught me something, and slowly, patterns emerged. Passion, in the gritty sense, isn't found fully formed. It's cultivated. It starts with interest, then deepens with time and exposure. Practice. Next comes practice. Not just any practice, but deliberate practice. The kind we talked about earlier. This is where grit gets tested. Interest makes you start. Practice makes you stay. Angela reminds us that mastery isn't about one grand effort, but thousands of small efforts stacked day after day. Passion without practice fizzles. Practice without passion burns out. But together, they fuel grit. Purpose. As interest deepens and practice sharpens, purpose emerges. We begin to see how our work matters beyond ourselves. Angela says this stage transforms passion into something durable. When we see our effort as service, we tap into a deeper reservoir of motivation. I've felt this. When I work only for myself, my energy runs out quickly. But when I connect what I'm doing to others, when I see how it helps, uplifts, or inspires, suddenly I can push much further. Hope. And through it all, hope underpins everything. Hope reframes setbacks, keeps us trying, and protects us from despair. So from the inside out, grit grows like this. Interest sparks it. Practice strengthens it. Purpose elevates it. Hope sustains it. That's the personal path to grit. Growing grit from the outside in. But Angela doesn't stop there. She points out that grit isn't grown in isolation. Our environment, parents, teachers, mentors, friends, cultures, plays a massive role. This is the second half, growing grit from the outside in. Parenting for grit. One of the most fascinating insights here is about parenting. Angela studied families and found a pattern. Kids develop grit when their parents are both supportive and demanding. Not just supportive, that can slip into indulgence. Not just demanding, that can slide into harshness. It's the combination that works. Think about a coach who pushes you hard, but also believes in you deeply. That mix of warmth and high expectations creates the perfect soil for grit. Angela calls this style wise parenting. It's neither permissive nor authoritarian, but a balance. I love you, and I expect you to rise. I remember my own parents. They weren't strict in a punishing way, but they held standards. When I wanted to quit piano lessons, my mom said, "You don't have to be a concert pianist, but you do have to finish what you start." At the time, I hated it. Now, I see what she was teaching me. Commitment. That's parenting for grit. The role of teachers and mentors. It's not just parents. Teachers and mentors shape grit too. Think back to a teacher who believed in you, but also pushed you harder than you thought you could handle. That teacher was cultivating grit. Angela tells stories of coaches who demanded excellence, but never stopped encouraging. The result? Students didn't just grow skills. They grew resilience. Mentors don't just model grit, they transmit it. When you see someone you admire enduring, persisting, and refusing to give up, it normalizes that behavior for you. Culture of grit. Zooming out even further, Angela talks about culture. Grit isn't just individual, it's contagious. When you're surrounded by people who quit easily, quitting becomes normal. But when you're surrounded by people who endure, persistence becomes the default. Think of military boot camps, or elite sports teams, or even certain companies. The culture is demanding. Expectations are high. Everyone around you is pushing through pain. And because everyone else is doing it, you do too. Culture creates invisible pressure. But in gritty cultures, that pressure pulls you upward. Angela shares how cadets at West Point make it through not just because of their own grit, but because of the collective grit of their peers. When quitting feels like betraying the group, you push harder. That's the power of environment. It amplifies grit. Can anyone grow grit? Angela ends this chapter with an encouraging message. Grit isn't reserved for the chosen few. Yes, some people may start with more natural perseverance, but everyone can grow it. Through cultivating interest, committing to deliberate practice, discovering purpose, nurturing hope, and surrounding yourself with demanding yet supportive people, grit becomes stronger. It's not fixed, it's not fate, it's something you can build. I find this chapter deeply hopeful, because it shifts grit from a mysterious trait into a skill, a way of being that we can all practice. And it makes me ask myself, am I cultivating grit from the inside? Am I choosing environments that push me to grow? Am I creating a culture of grit for the people around me? That's the challenge Angela leaves us with. Grit isn't just personal, it's relational, it's cultural. And when we grow it, inside and outside, we create conditions where greatness can flourish. Pause, reflect. With this, we've walked through the heart of Angela Duckworth's work. From the inside out, interest, practice, purpose, hope. From the outside in, parenting, mentors, culture. Together, they form a roadmap. How grit is grown, step by step, choice by choice, year by year. Conclusion. We've traveled a long road together. From Angela Duckworth's first days as a teacher, noticing how effort outshined talent, to her years of research uncovering the hidden power of grit, we've walked step by step through what makes people succeed when others give up. Let's take a breath. Let's pause. And let's gather the threads. What have we seen? We started with the definition. Grit is passion and perseverance combined. Not a flash of enthusiasm, but a long, steady fire. Not a sprint, but a marathon. We learned that talent isn't destiny. Effort counts twice. Talent x effort becomes skill. Skill x effort becomes achievement. Which means, in the long run, effort is the real game changer. We discovered that passion, in this sense, isn't about wild intensity. It's about consistency, caring about something deeply enough to stay with it for years, not days. We dug into deliberate practice, the uncomfortable, focused kind of effort that stretches us at the edge of our abilities, the kind that feels like failure, but secretly builds mastery. We explored purpose, the deeper why. The reason we keep going even when the grind is brutal. Purpose doesn't have to be grand, but it has to be bigger than just ourselves. We turned to hope, the belief that tomorrow can be better, that failure is not final, that setbacks are temporary. Hope reframes pain and transforms despair into determination. And finally, we saw that grit isn't fixed. It can grow, from the inside out, through our own choices and mindsets, and from the outside in, through wise parenting, supportive mentors, and cultures that normalize endurance. But what does it all mean for us, right here, right now? It means we are not bound by our starting point. It means we can choose perseverance over quitting. It means we can cultivate grit in ourselves and help grow it in others. I want to step back for a moment and reflect on why this matters so much. We live in a world obsessed with quick wins, viral fame, instant results, hacks and shortcuts. We celebrate the prodigy, the overnight success, the genius who makes it look easy. But the truth, as Angela shows us, is different. Behind every overnight success are years of quiet persistence, unseen failures, countless repetitions. Behind every genius is grit. And that truth is both sobering and empowering. Sobering because it means there are no shortcuts. Empowering because it means greatness is available to anyone willing to persist. Think of your own life. Where have you quit too early? Where have you mistaken excitement for passion? Where have you hidden behind not talented enough when what was really missing was deliberate practice? And more importantly, Where could you reignite your grit? What passion deserves a long-term commitment from you? What purpose could give meaning to your struggles? What hope could reframe your setbacks into lessons? Those aren't rhetorical questions. They're the questions grit demands we ask ourselves. Angela often quotes a Japanese proverb, "Fall 7, rise 8." That's grit, distilled into 5 words. It's not about avoiding failure. It's about refusing to stay down. Imagine if we all lived like that. Imagine if every time we stumbled, we saw it not as an ending, but as part of the journey. Imagine if we taught our kids, our students, our teams, not just to chase talent, but to cultivate perseverance. What kind of world would that be? I think about the candle and the firework. Talent is the firework. Dazzling, loud, gone in seconds. Grit is the candle. Steady, quiet, enduring. Which one lights the way through the long night? Always the candle. That's what grit is. That's what Angela Duckworth gave us. So, as we close this book, what's the takeaway? Don't wait for talent. Don't rely on sparks. Build the fire. Feed it daily. Tie it to purpose. Protect it with hope. And when the storms come, as they always do, let grit carry you through. Because in the end, it's not the most gifted who win. It's the most determined. Not the loudest, but the most persistent. Not the ones who burn fast, but the ones who keep burning. Pause here. Let it sink in. Ask yourself one last time, where in your life do you need more grit? What mountain are you willing to climb, step by step, day after day, year after year? That's your story. That's your grit. Final reflection. Angela Duckworth didn't just write a book about perseverance. She gave us a mirror, a way to see beyond the myths of talent and look honestly at what drives real success. And now, it's in our hands. To practice deliberately, to find purpose, to hold on to hope, to grow grit in ourselves, and to inspire it in those around us. That's the real power of this book. Not just information, but transformation. So here's the challenge. Fall 7, rise 8, and keep going. And so, we've reached the end of this journey. From the first spark of curiosity to the final reminder that grit is within reach of anyone, we've walked together through Angela Duckworth's vision of what it truly takes to succeed. If there's one thing I hope you carry with you, it's this. Success isn't reserved for the most talented. It belongs to those who keep going, those who care deeply, those who rise again and again, no matter how many times they fall. You don't need to be extraordinary to begin. You only need to begin and refuse to quit. Day by day, step by step, choice by choice, grit will carry you further than you ever imagined. So as you close this chapter, ask yourself, where in your life will you choose to stay the course? What passion will you commit to, not just today, but tomorrow, and the day after, and the year after that? What mountain will you keep climbing, even when the air gets thin? Because the world doesn't need more fireworks. It needs candles, quiet flames that burn steady and long, lighting the path through the darkness. Be that flame, be that light, be gritty. If you found value in this video, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share it with a friend who needs this wisdom.